Thank you for having me. And thank you all for being here on a Sunday morning. I'm not a morning person at all. I will first talk briefly about this project that I have embarked upon, and then I will only be able to scratch the surface of describing the data that is, and my observations, of course, of what is available before us. Today is World Heritage Day. Apparently, I didn't know this. I saw it on Facebook, and I would like to congratulate all of you for being part of such a glorious tradition. I think for the past 5 years, I have been looking at the production of music in the Indian subcontinent, largely focusing on women singers and looking exclusively at women singers. You can't look at them in isolation, and I will speak about that as well. What my ambitious plan is to sketch a history of musical practices by women singers in this country, starting from as early as 1902, which is when the first gramophone recording was made, up to perhaps the 1970s. I'm not interested in music after the 70s. I start with this image. This is a company painting from the 19th century. And I think this of course has been remade, it has been printed, it has been restored, but this is, I think, the original company painting that is available before us. And this is, of course, described in company records as what is called the notch. The notch is just a corruption of nach. And as you can see, there are 3 tawaifs, or courtesans, standing, and they're standing because in addition to singing, they would have danced what was known as the mujra. We don't know what the mujra was, and it seems I have no desire to reconstruct any of these practices, but because you just simply can't. But I think what you see today as Kathak is probably one dimension of this, with the emphasis on the footwork alone. You don't see much else, except if you are lucky enough to catch Birju Maharaj dancing. You won't see anything else except the footwork being elaborated. But what you do see, the earliest photographs that are available are, of course, these. These are 1880s, and these are described as tawaifs of dancing girls of Lucknow in the colonial record, and that's another photograph. It's interesting also that in this case they are seated, and in this case they are standing, and the traditional accompaniment would have been a sarangi, although you don't also see a sarangi in modern day performances. And there are various reasons for this. Maybe we can talk about this later. This is not the core emphasis of what I want to talk about today. So let us begin at the beginning. The first woman to record her voice in 1902 on November 8th was Gauhar Jan, and that is a painting F.W. Geisberg, who was a British man who was stationed in Calcutta, decided that he would record sounds of Indians. But I also want to state very clearly that recording actually begins in 1880. But in 1880, what we deem the classical today was recorded. These are sounds, male musicians, male performing artists mimicking animal sounds, and recordings of theatre productions. These are what you see in that period. I have not been able to recover any recordings prior to 1902, but I'm also not particularly interested in them. 1902 is when Goharjan is recorded, and I think it's a mere coincidence that that Geisberg was lucky enough to be able to record Goharjan, because in her time, Goharjan was perhaps one of the most celebrated musicians. Initially, Geisberg does not have any particular way or means of deciding whom to record. It is very inadvertent. It is only later when people take note of the fact that this man is recording music that local informants tell him whom he should be recording, right? Based on popular appeal, based on talent. But Goharjan, if you give a cursory, even just a cursory glance at the catalogue that has been prepared by the record collectors, of course, the chairman of that is very well known, Suresh Chandavankar, and it's really interesting the number of songs, the genres in which she records, and the languages that she records. And there is even an English song. It is called "My Love Is a Little Bird." This is what is recorded, and these are the earliest recordings in 1902. There are songs in Arabic, Sanskrit, Burmese, Persian. There are also, of course, recordings of songs that are today or are still considered within the realm of the classical. Thumris, Dadras, Horis, Tappas, and what used to be considered the classical ghazals. And I will play a brief snippet. I have tried to collect morning rags, Hindustani music, and I will speak exclusively about Hindustani music today. I don't think anyone has looked at recording in South India, but B.M. Sundaram, who used to be on the panel of the Music Academy of Chennai, has noted that he has actually catalogued 516 musicians in South India, women musicians in South India, in the early 20th century, some whom have recorded for the gramophone company. But I don't think anyone is working on this. We can discuss that after my talk if you're interested. About Goharjan, apart from being extremely wealthy in her times, she was clearly very idiosyncratic, a very interesting personality apart from a singer. She even threw a party for nothing less than 20,000 rupees when her cat delivered, and Goharjan also in her time seems to be the most paid artist. She was paid 5,000 rupees for one concert in the early 20th century, and that's an enormous amount. She later comes to Mysore, where she lives because she is summoned by the king to be the court singer. Also, Goharjan, it's really interesting in the way that men and women musicians interact in this period of time. I don't want to romanticize it. I do not want to go into neoliberal feminist mode where I say that, these women were rebels of their time. that has been done to death. And I mean, I don't think it's a useful argument, right? And of course, my project wants to look at the music, but in her time, it seems that she was extremely well respected, and in the ways that men and women interact. Apparently, at one concert, she sang a tarana. A tarana belongs, of course, to the khayal, which was a male-dominated genre of singing. And she apparently sings a tarana in also what was deemed at that time a rag that was sung by men, Darbari Kannada. And apparently later on, Ustad Fayaz Khan Sahib, who was a very prominent singer of that time, is told to rescue the prestige of his gharana by singing the same rag after her, but with her permission. Her own teacher, Moijuddin, apparently having not trained at all, but was an excellent Thumri singer, used to apparently also have very little respect for the wives of his time. If you look carefully at the data that is available, it is even apparent that he would actually sing with his back to certain women musicians whom he had no respect for. At the same time, it is interesting how in Moijuddin's life history, there are pivotal concerts that he delivered, and it's interesting how when these concerts are documented and when they're spoken of, they say in the presence of Malka Jan, in the presence of Gohar Jan, that he would sing. So there's a reference to him singing the rag of dawn, Lalat, in front of Gohar Jan, and I think this is very telling, right? You can't ignore something like that that is available in a primary source. I will play a morning rag by Gohar Jan. I will not be able to play the whole thing, but I will play a brief snippet of this. This is John Puri. This is one of the earliest recordings that is available. Gohar Jan has been written about extensively. There is also a book available if you're interested to read more about her. I will move quickly because I don't have a lot of time. I want to move on to another singer who was recorded before 1910, and Zohra, who is my favorite singer. Zohra, commonly called Zohra by Agrewali, but later on because she moves to Patna, also called Patnewali, was predominantly a khayal singer of her time, but she also sang a number of other genres. Zohra learned, of course, from celebrated ustads of the Agra Gharana, and it's very evident in her voice that she has. So the Agra Gharana is commonly described in popular discourse as very masculine, and what I think is fascinating about Zohra is that honestly, you don't need that kind of adjective to describe her, simply because although she sings in a full-throated voice and she's able to throw her voice exceptionally well, perhaps if there was a woman singer singing this gaiki at her time, it would look like this, right? And this is the only photograph that is available, and this was restored by my friend from Toronto. I also want to say that the recording of Goharjan was provided to me by Abhimanyu Dev from Calcutta, and the recording that I will play of Zohra as well. Both of them have been restored by him. Zohra lived for a very short period of time, and therefore recordings are also limited. But in a span of 3 years, she records 60 recordings for the gramophone company, and she's paid 2,500 rupees during that period of time per year. Of course, they get remuneration from the sales of these records. And I also want to say that the gramophone company was not one gramophone company. In the period of the early 20th century, there seems to be 6 gramophone companies who recorded the voices of various parts of India. And Zohra, of course, she has a very robust singing style, a very sensual and playful singing style as well. And I think I will first play what is available. This is also a morning rag. This is God Sarang. The composition is of Daraspia Mehboob Khan, whose compositions are sung even today. This is my favorite. I don't think anyone can reproduce a God Sarang like this. Zohra dies in 1913, and which means this record was probably this was recorded probably in 1908. Zohra has been admired by a number of singers mostly because there are only these gramophone recordings available, and each and every one of them is absolutely stunning. But I think what is relevant to Karnataka today is that Gangubai Hanagal was one of her biggest admirers, and it's a well-known fact established by Gangubai that it was when she heard Zohra, she said, "I want to sing like that." And Zohra also at a wedding, because we must realize also where musical performances take place in the early 20th century and where they happen now, right? So it was darbar halls, weddings, and at a royal wedding, actually, she gets into a tussle with another musician, and it is at this point that she goes into a self-imposed exile of 6 years, and she says, "I will not perform until I can sing to my fullest potential." and it is after that period of time when she emerges, and at that point of time she is unstoppable. Janki Bai of Allahabad, again, if you look at early commentators on gramophone recordings, it is very evident that 4 women stand out in all of their commentaries: Gauhar Jan, Zohrabai Agrewali, Malka Jan, and Janki Bai. Also because they recorded that early, right? These were some of the earliest women to record their voices. Again, this is the only photograph that seems to be available of Janki Bai. Janki Bai, also called Chappan Churi, Chappan meaning 56 because she was stabbed 56 times by a patron. And there are 2 versions of this story. One is the wife instructed the patron to do that to her. And one account says this might have happened in Allahabad in a home. Another seems to say that this might have happened in Banaras, although there is no proof of which is the correct version of the story. Janki Bai was very affectionately called by her fans as Bulbul. And interestingly enough, Gauhar Jan and Janki Bai sing together at the Delhi Darbar of 1911 for the coronation of the prince, King George V, as the ruler of British India. And there's a song that is composed exclusively for that coronation ceremony. I forget what it's called. Ye Jalsa Tajposhi Mubarak Ho, something to that effect. I'll play a short Hori by Janki Bai. Janki Bai seems to have been also extremely popular in her time. You had people from various places all over the north of India traveling to Allahabad just to listen to her. And in accounts by earlier commentators, it seems to be that if people from Patiala, the Nawab of Patiala would come to Allahabad just to listen to her. The Maharani of Jaunpur would also come to Allahabad just to listen to her sing. Because of this incident, she used to always sing behind a parda. But after a point, a Raja told her, I want to see your face. And it is only after that point, much later in her life, that she sings without a parda. I also want to say a few things about the larger picture before I continue. I think, I think we also have to look at the Kotha as a place of musical. I think, the larger public discourse on the Kotha has equated it to a brothel. And I think we forget largely what happened in these Kothas in terms of music. And although this is rarely acknowledged by male musicians and their descendants, it is very evident from earlier commentators that many male singers themselves had their preliminary concerts as they were emerging as the ustads that they became, actually in kothas on invitation from the wives. And I think this is you cannot forget something like this. Also, I also want to say something about changing notions of what constitutes the classical, because although in the earliest experiments of the gramophone company, women seem to dominate all recordings because men feel like the gramophone machine will take away their voice. And also they're just really hesitant. They also feel like the gramophone will steal their music, but women seem to be very open to the idea of recording for the company. Very cleverly. This obviously worked in their favor, and later on, men start recording, and it's also really, really fascinating how men actually mimic the female voice when they start recording for the gramophone company, simply because, and that of course tells you very clearly about the popularity of women musicians in their time, right? When all of these Nawabi courts start breaking down, a lot of women musicians from the north move to Bombay, right? And Calcutta, of course, this emerging metropolis, also because of the burgeoning of the cinema industry. You also have a segment of women moving from Goa, and this is by far one of the most vibrant communities to emerge in Bombay and to sing. And the highest paid singer of the 20th century, Kesarbai Kerkar, moves from Goa, from a village, Keri, which is just about 7 kilometers from Panjim, to Bombay at this time, of course to train. But a number of musicians move, and I will speak about a few of them in the course of this lecture. I also want to talk about what were the genres that were recorded. And I say this because what is accepted today as the classical seems very limited to a range of forms like the Drupad and the Khayal. But if you look at the gramophone recordings, it is very obvious that there are at least 20 different genres of music that are recorded, and they include the Drupad, the Dhama, the Sadra, the Khayal, the Chaturang, Tarana, Sargam Geet, Thumri, Dadra, and a number of forms that seem to have been completely forgotten today: Sohar, Ghato, Chaiti, Savan, and Jhula. And in very rare cases, Qawwalis as well have been recorded by courtesans in this period. Yes, again, my favorite singer, Rasulan. I honestly do not know how to describe Rasulan, because the music is just, it is perfection. It is absolute perfection. In Thumri, she was of course a Thumri singer, and by Thumri I mean the large genre that was called the Purab Thumri. And both the way how she produces her voice, the way she throws her voice, the way she arranges notes, and more importantly words, because in the Thumri, because it's Upashastriya, the words and the meanings of these words are extremely important, right? And the way Rasulan arranges these words and the phrases is just, I don't think anyone of her time could compete with that kind of perfection in singing. Rasulan was born in Mirzapur, and she moves, however, to Ahmedabad after the partition, because she moves out of her kotha around in 1948, just after independence. She marries a sari merchant in Banaras, and then they move to Pakistan, but she moves to Ahmedabad. In 1969, in communal riots, she loses her house because it is burnt, and then she moves back to Allahabad with absolutely no money, no patronage, nothing. And she opens a tea stall outside All India Radio where she once recorded, and someone sees her and recognizes her and takes her back into the All India Radio production studio. and she sees a number of portraits of women, and all the bais have been renamed Devis. And and then, however, there's a photograph of her that says Rasulan Bai. So she says, all of these women have become Devis, I'm the only Bai left. Again, Rasulan has been, there's a wonderful film that has been made about Rasulan Bai, and a recording of hers in 1935. It's called The Other Song. It was made by a Bombay-based filmmaker named Saba Diwan, and you can check it out. It's available. I won't say much about that because, I mean, the narrative is there, right? This is, of course, Rasulan chilling with her friend Begum Akhtar, who would again become one of the most famous singers of her time. Begum Akhtar, I will not speak about Begum Akhtar. There are 3 books written about Begum Akhtar. Again, she's extremely popular, and just for the sake of time, I do not want to speak about Begum Akhtar. I will play a short recording of Rasulan singing Rag Multani, if I can find it. A lot of interesting anecdotes seem to surface around Rasulan Bai. Apparently, she had a practice of putting her little fingers in her ears when she sang. So, at one particular concert, when she's in the green room, Kesar Bai Kerkar walks in, and Rasulan Bai is extremely shocked because Kesar Bai at that time was the greatest. She was the greatest singer of her time, right? I mean, in her own students' words, she was the Shriman Gaika, and which is, we will discuss that later, that she uses a male term. But anyway, Kesar Bai walks in, and Rasulan says, "Didi Aap, why are you here?" And she says, "I've come to listen to you." And Rasulan is completely flabbergasted. She's like, "But how can I sing in front of you?" And then Kesar Bai's response is really interesting. She asks, "Oh, so have your little fingers? Are your little fingers tired?" So it sounds much better in Hindi, but it's a very I really like reading that. It's in Kumar Prasad Mukherjee's book, and you can read. You can go back to that if you're interested. I also want to underscore one really important thing about. I think a lot of us forget that music is economy, right? And we sort of forget that women were recording their music for largely economic means, right? It's not. I mean, it's obvious that you can't ignore the fact that I want to be. The fame is irrelevant, and that dedication to this particular art form, which consumes you, right? Which consumes you intensely, is irrelevant. But I'm just saying that you can't ignore the fact that this was largely economic for a lot of women of this period. These are just photographs of Begum Akhtar. I'm also, so my project, in my project, I want to look at lesser known singers, but for today, I'm going to talk about singers who were extremely well known, who are extremely well known even today. This is a photograph of Kesarbai Kerkar. Kesarbai, of course, trained with Ustad Alade Khan Sahib of the Jaipur Gharana for 20 years, and it is only after his death in 1946 that she starts singing in public. Kesarbai, if you look carefully at Kesarbai's music, you will see an absolute perfection of sur, of voice production, of using notes, that are demanded by the particular rag that you are singing and the bandish, but also an absolute perfection of singing extremely complicated music. There's a lot that has been also said about Kesarbai. She was an extremely arrogant woman, and rightfully so. She entered a domain that was largely male, and then she beats the men at their own game to emerge as the greatest singer of the 20th century. Kesarbai, of course, as I told you, was born in Goa, moves to Bombay to train and then, of course, sing. Kesarbai refused to allow her music to be recorded, and also refused to sing for All India Radio, which was the largest patron at that time, and the way in which the masses could listen to her music. And therefore, the only legacy that this woman has are the few recordings that she made for the gramophone company, which subsequently she did not allow All India Radio to play because of a tussle that she had with All India Radio. There are private recordings that are extremely guarded. Again, a part of my work also is trying to make music more accessible to the public, because now we have the internet. And if bringing music out of kothas and darbar halls has democratized music at one level, we also have to realize that the next phase of that has been the internet and YouTube specifically, because if you look at the number of recordings that are emerging, old recordings that have been unavailable to the public in the past, YouTube is just abundant with recordings today. This is also the reason why I started my group on Facebook, to try and curate music and make it available to anyone with a Facebook account, and just place music in a context, because I also feel like a lot of people want to listen to music, although they may not have the know-how, they may not have the background, and I don't think any of that is necessary at all to be able to listen to good music. I will play a brief snippet of Kesarbai. This is Rag Desi, also a morning rag, and Desi, it's very interesting. For those of you who know music, she introduces a very nice Komal Dhaivat in addition to the Shuddh Dhaivat in her recording of Desi. Fast forward it simply because the Jaipur Gharana, which Kesarbai belongs to, excels in what are oscillations of notes referred to as gamaktans, and boltans and gamaktans. A boltan is to use the words to oscillate the notes, and a gamaktan is just the note. But that perfection of the which is the most difficult sound really to produce, you see that in Kesarbai's music, but you also see an absolute mastery of gamak. And her own teacher, one of her teachers, Ramakrishna Bua Vaze, said of her, when he listened to her, said, listening to Kesarbai is having costly ittar being sprayed on you, because that is the perfection with which she constructed and executed her dance. All of Kesarbai's recordings are available on YouTube because there's so few, and you can go and listen to them. Each one of them is a masterpiece, and I think I have listened to each of them at least 200 times. But every time I listen to them, I learn something new from listening to her. Yeah, I think I can't say more than this for now. This is, of course, Kesarbai receiving she was the first woman to receive the President's Award for Hindustani music. And Kesarbai says something very interesting in her old age. So Kesarbai gave up the concert scene the minute her her voice deteriorated. Exact minute it deteriorated, she gave up. And even very few people had access to access to her music. They couldn't even listen to her because she only sang for Maharajas, right, and Nawabs, and only in the houses of nobility. And she says, for 70 years I have sung for the gods. If the Indian people have enjoyed it, then I'm doubly happy. I'm elated. Kesarbai died at the age of 87. A lot of these women have lived for a very long time. This is the first conference, Indian music conference after independence in 1948. Kesarbai is the only woman, interestingly, who has been invited to this particular conference. But there are, of course, reasons for this, which I'll try to talk about. If you look at the history of the 20th century, two men who stand out are Bhatkande and Paluskar. And Bhatkande gave institutionalized music, gave it an institutional character, and Paluskar added a religious dimension to it. The Baiji didn't understand either of these things, right? And neither did they make any effort to understand the Baiji. The immediate response was just dismissal. It's interesting how Bhatkande himself tries to start a Tawaif school in 1925, and he says, we will invite Tawaifs to our school and we will train them so that they can join the mainstream. Of course, not a single woman shows up at the door of this Tawaif school. Why would they? All India Radio also emerges at this time. Kesarbai's recordings are from a period of 1935 to 38. And it's at the same time, All India Radio, under the guidance of Vallabhbhai Patel and B.R. Keskar, also issue a memorandum saying that any woman who belongs to the courtesan culture should not be allowed to sing for the radio. And Amlan Dasgupta has translated their memorandum, and I will read out. It says, anyone whose private life was a public scandal should be debarred from performing on the radio. But this does not stop All India Radio, because although this is a central memorandum from the metropolises, in the smaller towns, tawaifs are both recorded and their music is broadcast. One woman who I am particularly interested in is Durgesh Nandini Bai, who recorded from Patna. She, of course, loses all her money and she dies in penury because of a love affair that she has with this man, and then I think she just patrons are very exploitative, and I think she had my personality. She just gave in to all of this falseness of his love, and then she loses everything. But the music is absolutely stunning. If you would like to follow up on this project, please search for my group on Facebook. It's called My Music Archive, and I hope to be able to. The archival evidence says a lot about Durgesh Nandini, but I'm still yet to recover the recordings. I mean, a significant amount of recordings that I can listen to and pinpoint, and just talk about her music more in more depth. Another woman from the same gharana as Kesarbai, Mogubai Kurdikar, largely starts her life in the Sangeet Natak, and Sangeet Natak, Marathi Sangeet Natak, and you cannot look at Hindustani music in this period in Bombay without looking at the Sangeet Natak, because they're joined at the hip, literally. And although Mogubai starts her initial musical career in the Sangeet Natak, it is after the birth of her daughter, the celebrated Gana Saraswati Vidushikishwari Amonkar. It is only after her daughter's birth that she starts serious training with Alade Khan Sahib, and these are due to various reasons. And she, of course, what Mogubai does that Kesarbai doesn't do is a very elaborate note-by-note elaboration of the rag. You don't see that entirely in Kesarbai's music. Also, the way she structures her gamak tans are very different from the way Kesarbai structures her tans. I will play something by her. This is Mogubai teach, and I believe Mogubai used to play the tabla for her students if the tabalchi didn't show up. And this is her student of 40 years, Kausalya Manjeshwar. Kausalya Manjeshwar, of course, was a Gaud Saraswat Brahmin, and she did not sing much in public. All India Radio also decides at this time, under the lead of Pandit S.N. Ratanjankar, that they will have auditions for All India Radio, and they will decide whom to sing. And all the musicians are extremely offended by this, saying, how can you question my authority over my gharana's music? And there is a countrywide agitation against All India Radio at this time. It is first headed by Mogubai Kurdikar and later by Vilayat Hussain Khan Sahib, with secretary as Kausalya Manjeshwar. Kausalya Manjeshwar's sister's granddaughter lives in Bangalore, and she is the one who has provided me with this photograph of this Talim session. And there, Kausalya Manjeshwar and Mogubai Kurdikar at Alade Khan Sahib's grave, and she would visit the grave on the death anniversary of her guru every year till the day she died. I will play a short snippet of Mogubai singing. This is Rag Purvi from 1948. play more than that today. I have argued elsewhere, and that's an entire talk by itself, on how the Thumri evolved with time. The earlier Thumri was accompanied by the Mujra. However, when the Mujra was frowned upon, courtesans had to recast themselves as only singers. And the nature of the Thumri also changes that way. The older Bandishki Thumri was not sung with a lot of improvisation of notes. You see that much later in what is called the Bol Banao Thumri, Bol Banana Hai, right? And I think post-independence, you also see a lot of the ones at least who made it to All India Radio and who made a mark for themselves in terms of fame. There was a constant distancing of themselves, their own, this is of course self-constructed, distancing of themselves from their quotas. A lot of them got married, and more importantly, you'll see also in the way that they sing that a lot of very explicit antaras, the asthai is the repeating refrain, and the antara is sung just one time, a few times, and then the second line of the antara is sung only once in the traditional Thumri format. And you see that a lot of these antaras either are not sung, or the words are garbled intentionally, or the words are changed. And but it seems like at some level this was necessary for a Baiji to gain any fame. And I want to conclude. I think I should conclude. Okay, fine. I will play one last clip. This recording, of course, has only recently been restored and come into public discourse. This is Saraswati Bai Bhatarpekar, and Saraswati Bai, of course, also moved from Goa and seems to have trained in the style of the Agra Gharana under Khadim Hussain Khan Sahib. And this is Columbia's issued catalog, and this is a poster of a concert where she was supposed to sing. It is very, if she was to be placed with Abdul Wahid Khan Sahib, who was a revolutionary of his time, it seems to us that she must have been an extremely competent singer. And that is, of course, the truth of the pudding, of course, is in the tasting. And if you listen to her recordings, you will see the prowess with which she sings. There are very few recordings available. I found, I didn't find it, someone sent it to me. Someone, okay, that is not. Someone sent me a catalog, a Gujarati catalog, in which they have listed, and there are just about 10 to 12 recordings available of Saraswati Bai Bhatarpekar. But these are the women who I actually want to look at. Extremely competent women singers who at some level, I hope that their histories are retrievable, but at times it seems like nothing is available. Because at some level they've just disappeared into oblivion, and no one seems to be talking unless they're gramophone collectors who want to know who they are, or people like me who are interested in their lives and their music. I will conclude. I will say a few things after I play her recording, but this is the last recording that I will play. This is Rag Basant. Oh damn, I can't. I wanted to play Gangubai, but maybe if we concert is at Jinnah Hall, which in Girgaon, which seemed to be one of the most popular places in Bombay for musicians to sing at. The who's who, you made it only if you sang at Jinnah Hall, which is why this poster is particularly fascinating. I do not have time to speak about anyone else, but I knew I would overshoot time. Hirabai Barodekar and Saraswati Rane, both trained by Abdul Wahid Khan Sahib, but daughters, although this has only been intermittently acknowledged by them, of the founder of the Kirana Gharana, Abdul Karim Khan Sahib. And he wanted to take another wife, so their mother divorced him and said, and then changed their names. They were both given Muslim names at birth, and then she changed them, and then she gave them the surname Barodekar, which just meant people from Baroda, the Maharashtrian community of Baroda. Hirabai Barodekar has been the largest recorded artist for All India Radio. Of course, the archives of All India Radio are closed, and it's extremely difficult to access them. Although some people, All India Radio in Calcutta seems to be broadcasting her music even now. Very, very rarely, but they still, even today, even this year, 2015, someone intercepted the All India Radio Calcutta for me to listen to. I'm very grateful to all my friends who helped me do these things. Because she has largely been ignored in Karnataka, Gangubai Hanagal, Kannada Kanmani, probably the greatest woman singer. It's really interesting how Bhimsen Joshi, in one of and is popularly known to have said, "Nimdu kirana gharana, namdu kirana angadi," because she was the purest of this gharana, along with Hirabai, and trained by Abdul Karim Khan Sahib's student Savai Gandharv, born in a family of courtesans who, her mother was a Carnatic singer. However, she chose to learn Hindustani music, gave her fought breast cancer, survived it, and gave her last concert. She sang Rag Jai Javanti for 20 minutes at the age of 94. There is a beautiful book on Gangubai written by Deepa Ganesh, which you can read, extremely well written. A lot of narratives on music are really badly written, the modern narratives, and I would really encourage you to find a copy if you're interested of Deepa Ganesh's book on Gangubai and read it cover to cover. I've read it thrice, even though it was just released last year. I want to conclude with a few points, and then I'll be open to questions. I know I've overshot time drastically. The stage seems to have exerted a certain decorum on courtesan singers, where you had to prove your mettle as a musician, because otherwise the discourse would only focus on your sexuality. And this seems to be one of the biggest burden for women musicians in the 20th century, and this is exactly why I want to focus on the music. And Vidya Rao, who is Naina Devi's student, Naina Devi was Begum Akhtar's student and Rasulan Bai's student, and Vidya Rao has written a very telling statement in one of her books, and I want to conclude with that. Interesting is the emphasis on the spiritual value or meaning of the Thumri text, and this, it seems like there was a complete de-emphasis of the ambience that the Tawaif stood for, right? And the I don't even want to call it sexual, because sexual is just a subset of the larger ethos in which the courtesan operated. And Vidyaraj says very beautifully, the only way an embarrassed emerging nation could apologize for itself was to reinvent a 10th rasa. We know 9 rasas, the Navarasa, but this 10th rasa of bhakti was the only thing that the nation state uh, could invent for itself to just save its face. The erotic element in music and Thumri abounded in this, could not escape censure unless it could be read as a metaphor for bhakti. The best an embarrassed, brave new nation state could do with the Thumri's erotic lyrics was to invent a 10th rasa bhakti. And in its preeminent, I want to quote from another paper by Amlan Dasgupta. It is preeminently, the Thumri is a Shringaras form, an erotic form, unabashedly celebrating the body in its immanence, its beauty, its desires, its joys, and its sorrows. And if it is able to transcend the world, it does this by seeing truth here and now, in the body and in its desires. But music, of course, is constantly evolving, and the only thing permanent is change. And if at every level of this journey through the 20th century there has been loss and forgetting, I think a lot of that has been intentional. And it seems to be a part of the way in which North Indian classical music has stood the test of time. And I think I want to conclude with that.